Hello, dear listener. How are you tonight? Where are you as you press play? Snuggled in your bed, resting after a long day, or maybe drifting somewhere quiet? And what time is it now for you? Late evening, midnight, or the soft hour just before dawn? Tonight, we will travel together, not across roads or rivers, but through stories woven with wonder. Each tale will carry us further, step by step, into a night filled not only with sleep, but with gentle journeys and glowing dreams. So, close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the first story open its door. The adventure begins now. Once upon a time, when the sun burned red like molten copper, and dew still clung to the whiskers of the grass, all creatures gathered around a jutting rock that towered above the savannah. Upon that stone, the Lion King of Golden Mane held a newborn cub in his arms. The air was thick with the scent of warm earth, of fresh milk, and of far-off winds. The beasts below fell silent. The only sound remaining was the heartbeat of the land itself. An ancient baboon, stooped like a bent branch, came forward with staff in hand. He crushed forest fruit and ash into a paste, marked the cub's brow with a crescent of fate, and raised it high so that the sun would touch its fur. Thus, its name was etched into the breath of the world. Birds spread their wings, giraffes bent their necks, antelopes parted like waves, and the entire plain exhaled in awe, as if it had heard the footsteps of the future. When the naming was done, the sky glittered. The stars, old and watchful, seemed to nod. The king turned to his son, his gaze stern yet heavy with care. Within those eyes lay the burden of soil and the shadow of things yet to come. But shadows were not spoken of on this day. This was a day of first knots tied in the tapestry of destiny. The child's name was spoken slow and clear, so the wind would remember, and the rivers would never forget. At nightfall, the heavens swelled with stars. The king led his cub to the cliff and showed him the sweep of the realm. Wherever the sunlight touched, there lay his duty. Then the king told of the circle of life, the young becoming hunters, the hunters returning to the earth feeding the grass feeding the herd. Whoever eats is bound by debt. Whoever lives must someday repay. He warned of the gray land beyond the light, where laughter was cruel and the air foul. Do not tread there until you know the true name of fear. The cub nodded eagerly, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. His small heart drummed fast like a festival drum. At dawn, mist lifted. The steward bird circled, reporting the gossip of winds. The herds changed pasture. Buffalo trudged toward deeper pools. Beneath the cliff, mothers suckled their young, while the little ones chased their own shadows in noisy play. The cub was carried among them, hearing his name echo from every throat like stones flung into a single pool. Elders whispered, "As the name resounds, so shall the fate weigh. He who is lifted high by greetings will be summoned heavy by duty." At midday, the king bound 3 commandments to the child's tomorrow: moderation when full, courage when starved, silence when pride wishes to speak louder than truth. All bowed their heads at these words. Only one figure did not bow, a thin shadow standing at the cliff's edge, eyes gleaming with schemes. He watched the cub as a traveler watches a lamp in a locked house. Where light is brightest, there too the shadow deepens. And when shadows learn to speak, they often wear a smile to conceal their fangs. Evening came. The wind changed taste. Somewhere on the border, a dry laugh rattled like bones in the dark. The cub slept soundly, curled against his father's chest, while the stars opened their eyes and counted every word spoken, and every word left unsaid. The wheel had begun to turn, and every wheel carries with it a hidden thorn beside the crown. In the stone and grass castle, where beasts bowed whenever the sun touched the cliff, there lingered a corner, cold and silent. There dwelt a lion, lean and narrow, eyes like shattered glass, a mane dark as withered bark. He was brother to the king, born of the same blood, yet never chosen. A scar marked his face, small, but enough to twist every smile into a threat. That scar was a wound not only upon his skin, but carved deep into his pride. Each dawn he watched pride rock, gaze sharpened like whetstone. The throne was the bread he starved for. Every breath, every step, every thought bent toward it. Yet that throne was filled, and a new heir now slept in the king's den. He tasted bitterness with every hour, and within his chest the bitterness hardened into ash that refused to die. Far away, in the gray land where bones piled like fences, prowled creatures gaunt and laughing wrong. Hyenas, whose bellies were hollow drums, whose laughter cracked like dry twigs. The scarred lion sought them out, as a merchant seeks the night market. He promised meat for loyalty, feasts for their claws. They cackled, and their cackling was the signing of a pact spun of hunger and deceit. Thus, a web was woven in darkness, sticky as tar, waiting for prey that did not yet know its name. Meanwhile, the young cub thrived in sunshine, playful as noon. He bragged of his future crown, unaware that childish boasting was poison to ears already sick with envy. The scarred uncle bent low, whispering with a tongue sweet as honey, dusted with soot. If you would be king, you must know all the kingdom's secrets, even those your father forbids. The cub's eyes, lit like gems, never guessing the bait hidden in silken words. Day by day, the king labored to keep the circle unbroken, blind to the serpent that learned to shed its skin within his own kin. The scar upon the uncle's face, once a scratch, grew in meaning, until it was no longer a wound, but a banner. His laughter thinned the warmth from the air. His silences smothered the breeze. The earth itself had ears, and it remembered what the living ignored. One night, he stood upon the cliff's edge, the moon painting his scar long upon the ground. There he swore an oath, whispered not to men, but to shadows, that one day his brother's flame would be snuffed, and the throne would change hands. The oath rode the night wind and mingled with the hollow laughter of hyenas. From then on, his shadow ceased to stand still. It began to creep, stretching into every corner of destiny's road. One morning, the sunlight spilled like honey across the plain, but to a lion cub's eyes, that honey turned into sparks of mischief. Into his ears had slithered the uncle's whisper. Beyond the bright border lay a forbidden land, where bones were piled like fences, and fear had a laughter, not of joy, but of cruelty. Children are often lured more by prohibitions than restrained by them. So when the eyes of his companion gleamed with eagerness, the cub needed no further push. Together, they slipped away, carrying with them the pride of youth and the hunger for secrets. The grass faded to cracked earth. No bird song greeted them, only wind sighing through hollow skulls like a broken flute. Massive carcasses, relics of giants, lay scattered, their empty sockets staring skyward. The cubs scampered among them, their giggles ringing foolishly through the land of the dead. But their laughter drew listeners. From the shadows crept 3 gaunt hyenas, eyes feverish with hunger, jaws clattering with mirthless glee. Their laughter was wrong, like stones grinding bone, like mockery from a tomb. The cubs froze, then fled, their hearts thudding louder than their paws. But the dark ran faster. Claws reached close, and the king descended like thunder. His body split the dust storm. His roar cracked the graveyard's silence. The hyenas faltered, retreating back into their gray domain. The world steadied, though the cubs still gasped, trembling from the brush with death. The king did not scold, but his eyes bore a weight that pressed them down. On the way home, he spoke not of rules broken, but of truths forgotten. That night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, he told his son that the kings of old glimmered there above, watching. When you are afraid or lost, his voice deep as drums, remember, you who are never alone. The cub listened, but his pride swelled more than his understanding. In his mind, he dreamed of the day when his mane would blaze and his roar would scatter clouds. He forgot the difference between bravery and recklessness. From afar, the scarred uncle watched, lips curved into a thin smile. To him, the cub's fiery spirit was no promise. It was kindling, waiting for the spark of betrayal. And in the gray land, the hyena's laughter still echoed among the bones, reminding all who heard, what death spares once, it may claim again. The wheel of fate turned another tooth, sharper now, biting deeper into the wood of time. One morning, before the mist had fully lifted, the scarred uncle whispered again into the cub's ear. His words dripped like honey, but carried a hidden edge. Down in the gorge, a surprise awaited. The cub, eager for wonders, bounded away, never guessing that the sweetest tongues often hide the sharpest knives. The gorge was silent, its walls steep and bare. The cub waited in the open basin, puzzled, until the earth began to tremble. At first, a murmur, then a roar. An entire herd of wildebeests cascaded down the canyon like a living flood. Dust rose, hooves thundered, horns clashed. The air filled with the storm of bodies. The cub was swallowed in chaos, his cries drowned in the stampede. Then, from above, the king hurled himself into the torrent. He struck the ground like lightning, seized his son, and hurled him to safety upon a ledge. But in saving his child, he himself was dragged back into the deadly tide. Desperate, he clawed his way up the cliff, eyes burning, muscles straining, until his paws found the ledge where his brother waited. For a heartbeat, salvation seemed within reach. Yet the scarred one leaned close and murmured words meant not to bless, but to damn. With a sudden thrust, he hurled the king back into the storm of horns and dust. The roar of hooves swallowed the lion's cry, and the gorge fell into silence, broken only by the child's desperate wails. The cub pressed against his father's still body, calling again and again, but only the wind replied. Then the uncle appeared, his shadow long, his voice heavy with false mourning. He laid the blame upon the child. "It is you who caused this." And when the cub, trembling, could no longer speak, he whispered the cruel command, "Run away, run, and never return." The cub fled, heartbroken, the gorge echoing with his sobs. The hyenas followed, teeth bared, laughter sharp as blades. They drove him into the desert, certain the sun and sand would finish what they began. Exhausted, the cub collapsed, alone and nameless, abandoned by kin and by fate. Back at Pride Rock, the scarred uncle took the throne, his voice hollow as he proclaimed himself king. The hyenas laughed, their cackles mixing with his rasping roar. The crown had been seized, but it was purchased with a brother's blood, a nephew's exile, and a kingdom already trembling under the weight of deceit. Above the desert, the stars veiled their eyes, but they did not forget. They shone faintly upon the fallen cub, as if whispering, "What is cast away today will one day return." And so the wheel of destiny, cracked but unbroken, turned onward, waiting for the wanderer to come back and mend its spokes. The desert was merciless. Its sands burned like iron coals, its sun pressed down like a smith's hammer. Upon this furnace, the small lion staggered, his breath ragged, his paws trembling. With each step, his vision blurred until he collapsed, ready to be swallowed by the indifferent dunes. Yet fate does not always let the desert claim its due. Two wanderers found him there, a meerkat with quick eyes and a tongue sharp as thorns, and a warthog with a heart as vast as his belly. They were creatures without tribe or master, living outside the laws of claw and crown. Where others saw death, they saw only another stray in need of shade. With care and laughter, they dragged him to safety, fed him, and asked nothing in return. When the cub awoke, he awoke to a new world, not of kings or thrones, but of songs and jokes. His grief was buried beneath the noise of banter, his hunger quieted with food of strange kind. Beetles and grubs, the banquet of exiles. The meerkat and warthog taught him a charm of 3 words, light as air, but strong as chains. No worries. Forget the past. Ignore tomorrow. Today alone is enough. So he grew. From fragile orphan to strong young lion, his mane thickened, his body hardened. His roar could send birds flying from the trees. But within, the fire of his name smoldered low. The 3 words shielded him from pain, yet they shackled him to emptiness. He laughed, but did not dream. He lived, but did not remember. On nights when the stars burned fiercely, sometimes he glimpsed a face in their glow, a mane golden as dawn, eyes steady and kind. He would turn away, whispering the charm, forcing himself not to see. For memory is heavier than sand, and he feared to carry it. Meanwhile, far away, his homeland withered. Rivers dried, herds scattered. The land moaned under the rule of the scarred one. Yet in the desert, the lion lay under foreign stars, lulled by 3 careless words. The kingdom cried for its heir, but he slept behind a wall built of laughter and forgetfulness. The wheel of fate did not halt, though. It ground forward, waiting for the day when the sleeper would wake and remember the true weight of his name. Time in the desert leaked away like water from a cracked jar, slow, unnoticed, and gone before one could measure it. The cub had grown into a lion, with a mane full and strong, his body hardened by years of idleness under careless stars. With his 2 companions, he passed the days in games, laughter, and lazy hunting. The charm of 3 words, no worries, still guarded him, keeping the old grief asleep. But fate sent a visitor. One hot afternoon, during a playful chase through the brush, he leapt upon a stranger and brought her down. When their eyes met, the past surged back. She was no stranger at all. Nala, his childhood companion, grown sleek and fierce. Surprise gave way to joy, yet beneath her joy was urgency. She brought tidings heavy as stone. Their homeland was withering. The rivers had dried, the herds had fled, the grass had burned away. The scarred lion now sat upon the throne, his allies the hyenas, who consumed without measure. The lionesses were driven to hunt in vain, returning with nothing but exhaustion. Even Simba's mother, Sarabi, now walked hollow-eyed. "You must return," Nala pleaded, "for you are the rightful king." But the weight of guilt still shackled him. The echo of his uncle's lie, "You killed him," throbbed inside his skull. He turned away, his voice rough with fear masked as anger. He denied his duty, denied his past, denied even himself. Nala's gaze hardened. "You're not the cub I knew," she said, and her words cut deeper than claws. With them, she tore a hole in the wall of false peace he had built. The 3 words of forgetfulness trembled, no longer strong enough to keep the truth sealed. That night, Simba lay beneath the stars, restless. He stared upward, and the heavens seemed full of accusing eyes. He remembered his father's teachings about the light, the shadow, and the balance that held the world together. His chest ached, for the truth he had fled now prowled in circles around him, waiting to pounce. And far away, in the withering kingdom, the scarred one sat restless on his throne of bones. The rain would not come. The earth cracked deeper. The herds dwindled. His crown grew heavier as his land grew emptier. Even the hyenas, his allies, whispered in hunger and discontent. In both places, the desert and the dying plain, the air thickened with storm. One lion tried to sleep under stars that would not blink. Another tried to rule a throne that would not stand. Both knew the calm was ending, for the crack in peace had opened, and through it, destiny would return. The night was heavy with stars, each one burning like an ancient eye. Through the whispering brush came a figure bent and wiry. The old baboon, staff in hand, charms rattling from its crooked wood. He sniffed the air, listened to the earth, and grinned. The breath he sought still lingered in the world. The air had not perished, as rumor claimed. He moved with trickster steps, dancing, muttering, striking his staff. He called the lion's name as though summoning a spirit from the depths of a well. Simba, restless and angered, chased after him until the chase itself led him into mystery. At last, they reached a pool of still water, its surface a silver mirror under the moon. "Look," the Old One urged. Simba gazed and saw only his own face, tired and heavy. Disappointed, he turned away. But the baboon spoke again. "Look deeper." The lion bent once more, and this time the water shifted. The reflection changed, not his face, but another, a mane like sunlight, eyes wise and firm, the face of the father he had lost. The wind rose, clouds gathered, and the heavens opened their mouth. In a voice that rolled like thunder, yet warmed like hearth fire, came the words, "You have forgotten me, because you have forgotten yourself. Remember who you are." Simba's heart quaked. Memories struck like lightning. His father's lessons about the balance of life, the lands of shadow, the duty bound to his name. The walls of forgetfulness crumbled. In their place flared a fire, bright and unyielding. For the first time since the gorge, he stood tall, not as a runaway, but as a son of kings. The old baboon laughed, tapping his staff against the ground in glee, as if he had seen a seed sprout at last after long drought. "You know the way," he said, and vanished into the night, leaving only laughter echoing through the trees. Simba raised his eyes to the stormy sky. The stars no longer accused. They beckoned. He turned toward the horizon, where smoke still curled, where the land cried for its air. His paws were steady, his breath fierce. He would return, and he would claim not just a throne, but the truth of his name. Simba no longer wandered. His paws struck the ground with purpose, carrying him out of the desert and back toward the land that had birthed him. At his side walked Nala, fierce and unwavering. Behind them trudged Timon and Pumbaa, nervous yet loyal, unwilling to leave their friend, even as he marched toward storm and fire. From afar, Pride Rock rose like a black tooth against the horizon, but it no longer gleamed. Smoke smeared the sky, grass lay brittle and gray, bones littered the paths once trod by herds. The air was foul with hunger and ash. Where once had been the laughter of streams, there now lingered the cackling of hyenas. As they drew closer, Simba's chest tightened. He saw the lionesses, gaunt and weary, their ribs showing through dull coats. They still hunted, but brought back nothing. The prey had long fled from the poisoned land. Among them moved his mother, Sarabi, her stride still proud, though her eyes were hollow. She faced the scarred king with defiance, saying the land was dead and they must leave to survive. Scar, perched upon the stone throne, lashed out with words rasping like thorns. No one would leave. No one would disobey. His crown rested not on loyalty, but on fear. In the shadows, Simba and his companions watched. The cub he had once been trembled inside him. Yet the lion he had become stood steady. He saw his mother suffering, his people broken, his homeland burned. He remembered thunder's voice in the sky. Remember who you are. Smoke swirled. Lightning flickered in the gathering storm. Simba stepped forward at last, paws firm upon the charred earth. He moved through the ranks of lionesses, his presence both strange and familiar. Murmurs rippled. Ghost or son? Lost or returned? Sarabi's eyes widened. She knew the truth at once. Her child had come home. Scar's laughter rang thin, brittle, like glass ready to shatter. He mocked. He doubted. But the ground itself seemed to quake beneath Simba's stride. For the shadow had grown fat and heavy, while the rightful name had returned, lean but unbroken, carved by exile and pain. Above them, rain waited to fall, storm waiting to break. The air held its breath. The moment had come. The wheel of fate had carried the wanderer back to the very stone where all had begun, to face the shadow that once cast him out. The plain fell silent when Simba stepped into the open. His mane glistened in the storm's light, his eyes burning with both memory and resolve. The lionesses gasped. Some whispered his name. Others thought him the ghost of the fallen king. Sarabi's breath caught. In him, she saw the cub lost to exile and the heir reborn. Scar's lips curled into a smile, thin as a knife's edge. He cloaked his fear with mockery, declaring the wanderer a traitor, a murderer who had slain his own father. The lie he had sown so long ago returned, but now it rang hollow. Simba staggered under its weight, the echo of guilt still clinging. Yet Scar, drunk on his own deceit, pressed harder, forcing him to speak before all. But pride is a weak cage. In his arrogance, Scar confessed what he had kept hidden, that it was he who sent the king into the stampede, he who cast his brother to death. His words, meant as a whisper of triumph, spread like fire in dry grass. The lionesses roared, thunder answered, and lightning split the sky. The judgment had been spoken, not by Simba, but by the guilty himself. The battle broke like a flood. Hyenas swarmed, their laughter shrill and hungry. Lionesses leapt with desperate fury. Claws struck, teeth tore, the air filled with dust and fire. Timon and Pumbaa, though small, threw themselves into the fray with reckless bravery, scattering enemies with trickery and courage. Pride Rock became an altar of struggle, every stone a witness to blood and oath. High upon the cliff, Simba faced Scar. Rain slicked their manes, fire glared in their eyes. Scar pleaded, begged, shifted blame upon the hyenas. Simba pinned him beneath paw and thunder, but spared his life, saying the truth was punishment enough. Yet treachery dies hard. Scar struck again in coward's fury. Simba met him with the strength of memory, hurling him from the cliff. He fell into the shadows where the hyenas waited. They had heard his betrayal, felt his scorn. Their laughter turned crueler still. But this time, it was for him. They encircled the fallen king, and the storm swallowed the rest. Rain poured in sheets, washing the blood from stone. Simba climbed the rock, each step heavy as law, each stride sealing his return. At the peak he stood, lifted his head, and roared. The sound split the night, carrying through valleys and hills. It was both judgment and promise. The land would live again. The sky opened, and the rain fell hard, drumming against stone, soaking the scars of battle. Flames hissed and died. Smoke thinned and curled into the night. The land drank greedily, the parched soil sighing as life returned with each drop. It was not just water. It was judgment. It was blessing. It was the seal of a new beginning. On Pride Rock, Simba stood, his mane plastered by the storm, his chest heaving with the weight of all that had passed. He was no longer the cub who had fled in shame, nor the wanderer who had hidden behind laughter. In his eyes burned the light of a king, tempered by pain, sharpened by truth. His mother bowed her head, not in fear, but in recognition. Nala stood at his side, steady as the earth itself. And behind them, the lionesses lifted their gazes, seeing not a ghost, but a leader born anew. The rain ran down gullies, filled dry pools, coaxed shoots of green from cracks in stone. Herds far away sniffed the air, stirred, and began to return. The wheel of life, once broken, groaned back into motion. Simba climbed to the highest point of the rock. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolled, and he lifted his head. His roar thundered across the plains, carried by storm and rain alike. It was the cry of claim, the cry of renewal, the cry of a name taken back. For years, he had been shadowed by lies, but now the truth spoke louder than deceit. He was the son of Mufasa, the king, rightful and true. The storm raged, then passed, leaving stars to glitter again. They looked down, as if nodding, as if whispering, "You remembered." And in their light, the land below began its slow rebirth. Seasons shifted, and the wounded land slowly healed beneath the steps of its rightful king. Rivers once more carved their way through the valleys. Grass rolled like carpets of emerald across the plains, and herds returned in steady rhythm. Under Simba's watch, the balance was restored, not through fear, but through duty, measured and just. The lionesses hunted with vigor, no longer desperate, but guided by respect for the circle. Prey returned in abundance, and in their return, the land breathed easier. Each dawn, Simba walked the ridges, scenting the air, listening to the voices of earth and sky. Each night, he gazed upon the stars, no longer ashamed, but speaking quietly to them as to old companions. Time, however, does not rest. Soon, Nala bore a cub, eyes bright as morning dew. Once more, the creatures of the savannah gathered at Pride Rock. The ancient baboon, bent but unbroken, smeared the sacred mark across the infant's brow and raised it high. Sunlight kissed its fur, and the wind carried its name across the plains. The herds bowed, the birds wheeled, the circle spun anew. From the height of the rock, Simba stood beside Nala, their manes brushing in the wind. He looked down upon the child, then upward to the stars. They shone with approval, with memory, with the endless chain of those who had reigned and returned to dust. And in that shining, he understood. The crown is never owned, only borrowed. It is carried for a time, then passed to the next link in the circle. The land was at peace, but not idle, for peace itself is only a pause before the wheel turns again. Yet this pause was enough. The circle had closed where it had once been broken, and in closing, it opened again, endless, eternal. The rains had long since healed the cracks of the earth, and the savanna stretched green and golden as far as eyes could see. Under Simba's rule, the circle held firm. The hunters took only what they needed. The prey flourished in number, and the rivers sang to the rhythm of life renewed. But no kingdom rests forever in silence. Beyond the borders, in the wastes where the earth was still scarred and gray, shadows gathered. Hyenas, those who had survived their master's downfall, wandered in bitterness. They remembered Scar not with love, but with gnawing hunger. And hunger always seeks a new banner to follow. In the whispers of night, they plotted, their laughter no longer wild, but cold, waiting for the day a crack might appear in the circle once again. Meanwhile, Simba's cub grew strong, climbing rocks too high, chasing butterflies too swift, and asking questions too sharp for answers to soothe. Simba watched with both pride and unease. He knew that to raise a king was to raise a soul strong enough to walk with shadows, yet not be devoured by them. The stars above gleamed as ever, but he also knew the stars did not protect. They only watched. And so the land lived, vibrant and trembling, as all lands must. For every piece carries within it the seed of future trials. Every roar echoes until another must rise. The circle had closed and opened again. And somewhere in the silence of tomorrow, the wheel's next turn was already waiting.